What's up, everyone? It's Punk Rock Talk, episode 28. My guest today, out of Atlanta, Georgia, is Jay Crash, the owner-operator of Terminus Hate City record label. Right now, you're listening to the song Nosophobic by Crypt. They are one of the bands on Terminus Hate City. You can find them on our playlist on Spotify. It's Rebellion Noise 2022. If you're not following that playlist, you need to do it. We update it every Monday in correlation with whoever our guest is going to be on Punk Rock Talk that week. You can find it on Spotify by searching for Rebellion Noise 2022 or by searching for the Havoc. Going to our page, scrolling to the bottom, you'll see it there. Have you missed an old episode of Punk Rock Talk? No need to worry, you can find them on the Havoc's YouTube channel. All of the past episodes are there, and we upload the most recent episode to our channel every Thursday. So today's episode will be available tomorrow. If you have not yet subscribed to the Havoc's YouTube channel, you should do that. We're always working on new content for our channel. Click that bell icon while you're there. That way you'll be notified every time we upload new content to the channel. This episode of Punk Rock Talk and every episode of Punk Rock Talk is brought to you by our wonderful sponsor, Dead and Buried Inc. Are you in a band? Do you need merchandise? Dead and Buried Inc. are your source. They can print t-shirts, patches, stickers, buttons, posters, the list goes on. Whatever you need, they can do it. You can find them here on Instagram at Dead and Buried Inc. That's Dead and Buried Inc. INC, not INK. Or online at their website, deadandburiedinc.com. Again, that's Dead and Buried Inc. INC, not INK. If you're looking for Havoc merchandise, that's where you're going to find it. So check it out. If you're in a band and you need merch, order from them. This episode of Punk Rock Talk is also brought to you by our other sponsor, Rebellion Noise Records. This compilation was just released, and it's getting an update that will be released very soon. Features all the bands that are going to be playing on 40 Fest January 2023. And we've got some more 40 Fest announcements today on this episode of Punk Rock Talk. I also just released Punk Rock Attack Volume 1 on Rebellion Noise Records. If you're not familiar, it's my new label. Punk Rock Attack Volume 1 will be in the hands of the bands very soon. They're being manufactured now. And they will be available for free on those bands' merch table. You can follow Rebellion Noise Records right here on Instagram. Just search for Rebellion Noise Record. That's the only place that we have a presence right now. Okay, before I invite our guests, if you have questions for myself or for Jay Crash during this interview, tap that question mark icon on your screen. You can submit your questions there. Don't put it in the comments section. I don't really pay attention to the comments section. It'll get lost there. So again, it's as simple as just tapping that question mark icon on your screen. And one last thing. Our friend Brittany from Oil Change has a GoFundMe page that was launched by her grandmother in an effort to help fund her upcoming heart surgery. I have not seen an update in the last week. If she posted it, I didn't see it. As far as I know, we're still waiting on more information from the doctors. But regardless of that, you should definitely check out the GoFundMe page and make a donation. You can find it by going to Oil Change's Instagram and looking at the link in their bio. It'll take you to her GoFundMe. Thoughts and well wishes are going out to Britt. I know you're going to make it through this, so just keep your head up, girl. Okay. With that, I think it's time that we go ahead and get Jay Crash on here. What do you guys say? Let me go ahead and get that invitation sent to him. Okay. All right, invitation has been sent.
Hey, how's it going, man?
What's up, bud? How you doing, Jay?
Doing great, doing great.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for being my guest today on Punk Rock Talk so that we can talk some metal.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Stoked.
Of course. You know, you and I were talking just a few minutes ago, and I was telling you the same thing I'm going to tell the audience. Like, this is cool for me because I'm a huge metalhead, and it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a change of pace. Although I could talk about punk rock all day long.
Right. Hell yeah.
Metal's another passion of mine. So this is going to be really cool. And before we dive deep into that topic, could you please just introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are, where you're from, and about your label?
Absolutely, yeah. My name is Jay Crash, everybody. I own Terminus City. It's a record label and management company that's located in Atlanta, Georgia. And yeah, we started in 2018 and kind of been, you know, the COVID years were a little bit weird, but everything, you know, ever since then we've been going strong. So, you know, everything's been going according to plan, so to speak.
Yeah,
really.
man.
There is no plan.
Right on. Yeah, man, the whole COVID thing, like, you know, that just really disrupted everyone's plans. And, you know, for you, someone, you know, trying to get a new label off the ground, you know, it's kind of weird to think about having a label in today's landscape. But then when you throw the whole COVID thing into the mix, like, you know, that is a whole other conundrum.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you know, one, what was your inspiration for starting the label? And once you kind of started getting the ball rolling with it and the whole COVID thing started, you know, what you did to pivot and, you know, how you approach that with the bands.
Well, so really when we started, it was very small and very much so, I think a year, well, probably like a couple years technically, from, you know, the COVID quarantine actually, but it was very much so. We started with pretty much one to two artists on the label. Ryan Buck was the first artist on the label, and it pretty much just originally started as the inspiration was a lot of the bands, and the scene in Atlanta itself was a huge inspiration for me. I mean, ever since, you know, I played music and started playing music in the Atlanta scene. Then it was just, it was, you know, I wanted to do more, and saw a lot of people doing more as far as like promoting the, you know, the scene, the, you know, their bands, friends bands and stuff like that. And so I mean, that was very much so an inspiration to me from the get-go. Was kind of, you know, I recognize like a need for the community to have uh, more venues, more practice spaces, you know, more shows, obviously. And, you know, to get those things was, you know, kind of to put in the hard work, and to, you know, obviously I didn't have enough money to get a venue, or do something extraordinary, you know, really big like that, you know, that costs a lot of money. But, you know, the next best thing I thought of was, you know, I can get bands recorded. I can talk to, you know, producers, engineers, and, you know, work with them, and, you know, help these bands kind of manage themselves and work past a certain point that I saw a lot of like the scene kind of imploding in on itself, you know, and I mean, obviously like things like COVID made that a million times worse. So, aside, and I mean, that kind of definitely pushed me, it motivated me, seeing the, everybody's unwillingness to quit, you know, like throughout quarantine and everything, you know, everybody kind of working and like writing and sitting down and, you know, getting with their bandmates, and like, you know, whether it was over Zoom or whatever else, you know, is like kind of just continuing the grind. And that like really inspired me to keep going with the label, honestly, you know, because like there was definitely like after that second year when, you know, COVID hit, it was just like, whoa, fuck it, dude. Like there's nothing, you know, was left after this. So it was very inspiring to see, you know, a lot of bands, and, you know, see them continuing to write, you know, no matter what. And, you know, it definitely helped me push towards the next phase of the record label, which will be, you know, this next few years and stuff. So.
Very cool, man. I love that you have such a passion for your local scene. That's one thing that Bill and I have talked a lot about, because it's obvious how much he cares about the Atlanta scene and the bands in Atlanta, and, you know, trying to promote them and pair them up with some other bands that already have a following. You know, because in today's market, it seems really difficult to break new bands.
It is.
And you know, for as hard as it is in the punk scene, I think that the metal scene is nearly impossible to really capture a large audience these days.
It's so true. So true.
You know, I have a lot of experience in the metal scene, having been in a metal band myself for years. And what has kind of like astonished me is, one, like how large the scene has become without there being a lot of media attention for the bands. Like, you know, in the early days when MTV was still playing music videos regularly and there was Headbangers Ball, like it was kind of, you know, a given that that was going to attract a large audience.
Right.
But that's been gone away for a long time now. But the metal community has managed to grow and thrive despite there not being this whole, like, you know, large media presence, you know, like there was in the 80s and the 90s. What do you think it is about metal that makes it continue to grow? And not just like with the audience, but with how many bands there are?
Yeah, I mean, that is probably like a double-edged question. I mean, for sure, like the bands that I'd say the community grows because in part because there are so many bands, but like at the same time, you know, that has its own limits, you know, with like the, you know, any market and anything, you know, in this is music and this is art, but it's also business. So like if, anything in the business world is going to get oversaturated, and people are going to get drowned out and drown themselves out. And I mean, I would say like a huge thing that's pushed the metal community forward, is especially the underground. I mean, there's always, local bands that are coming up, and friends of bands that have sort of risen, to the, not necessarily the top, but there's always like kind of there's a steady rotation of like the next big, spotlight, in a sense. So like, and I like seeing that, and I think that helps the community keep the local scene alive, in a way. And I mean, that is something that I think is really important, just in terms of keeping the local scene alive, because you see the growth of the larger scene outside of it, and so I've seen a lot of bands do that in Atlanta, and it's impressive. I mean, not just Atlanta, but I mean, it really is impressive to see, one band kind of bring their community together despite so many other bands, going on, and there's always live shows, there's always stuff to do, there's always, other events and other things outside of live music to do. So it's really, kind of just a matter of the amount of bands that want to be involved in the community, and not just bands, but like, people are always kind of doing something, whether you're in a band or a promoter for a band or a manager for a band or something like that. And it's impressive to see kind of the grind, and I think that really helps limit the oversaturation when everybody's kind of working to, be like, hey, check out my homie's band, check out, these guys, like, let me bring, my whole band and their entourage to, my friend's show or whatever, they might not be in a band together, they might just be friends, but that helps a lot too, when you just have kind of, the fans. It might be a small community, of whatever, however many, it's like just a few local bands. It might be, however many, and that was one thing that I saw, was just, especially growing up in Atlanta, was a lot of several like pockets of local bands having like their own little kind of fan base, and just kind of growing from there, having 20 people steadily coming to shows, and then from there, you have 20 people in each band that are playing shows and stuff, and everybody kind of starts to mingle and become friends, and start to go to other shows despite bands not playing on them, and supporting kind of everybody in the scene. And I mean, it's not like an easy road, everybody's kind of still out there grinding, and nobody just like shows up to their first show and it's, the way that, it is in the movies or whatever, where it's just, packed out house and, just opening up, and I mean, some first shows go exactly like that, for sure, like for many bands, without a doubt. But, the realistic, the reality is you got to grind and kind of hustle and promote yourself just like anybody else, and having the more people that support you and appreciate the things that you do behind that. I think that's something that the metal community, it's helped it grow, but it's also helped it divide. It's worked to divide, as well. There's a lot of division and everybody's like the subgenres of metal, or it's like, what's the meme? Like, there's more subgenres in metal than there are on Pornhub or whatever. And it's like, some shit like that. It's just really funny. Like, it helps, but it also kind of works against it, with the oversaturation thing. But I think, again, just balancing that, where everybody's hustling, then it works to grow it, exponentially sometimes. But
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I'd love to touch on, and one of the things that you said was the business side of that scene. And I can tell you from personal experience that the business mentality in the metal scene is so much more prevalent than in the punk scene. And that's not like a diss on the punk scene or anything.
yeah,
In fact, that's one of the things that I love about the punk scene, because I feel like it's so much more community based, and like you can hold people at their word. Like, you know, a handshake is just as good as a written contract.
Yeah.
But in the metal scene, that is definitely not the case. Everything comes down to a contract and, you know, defined or specified numbers. And I think in a lot of ways that's great for bands, you know, that have the opportunity to get out there and actually make some money. But in other ways, I think it really works against them, because there is always someone out there that is looking at bands as nothing more than dollar signs for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, from the artist's perspective, that is so incredibly frustrating, because there's a lot of people out there that are referred to as industry professionals in the metal scene specifically, that are basically robbing bands. You know, they're telling them, hey, we can help you. We can help you with publicity or whatever. Just, you know, pay us $600 a month and we'll get you more followers on Instagram and Facebook and yada, yada, yada. And I hate to admit this, but man, I have fallen victim to that in the past.
Yeah.
And it, as an artist, it really feels like it starts to drain your creative soul. So what would you say to any bands out there, metal bands that are trying to come up, and you know, how they can avoid those types of people in the metal community?
Honestly, reading about music business, looking up just kind of there's a lot of stuff on YouTube even. You know, there's a lot of resources out there, you know, books that, I mean, it's, you know, they're written by lawyers, but you know, you can learn a lot of information from that. But that's not all. I mean, it's definitely paying attention to your art, really. And I mean, it's like definitely like not undervaluing yourself as an artist. You know, you also got to be realistic and understand that it's not, you know, it not any, I mean, it's very hard pressed to think of any even major record labels to this day that could turn a band, you know, overnight. You know, if your music sounds bad, like if there's not enough to it, or if it sounds the same, or like whatever, you know, there's a million factors that are coming into it that like are definitely business oriented, that somebody up there is going to be looking at it and not really looking at the artistic factor. And they're just going to be like, well, how many numbers do they pull? And, you know, it's like Spotify's a huge, I can definitely say, like, from the upper, you know, echelons of the industry, like Spotify is one of those like only statistics that people look at. And it's like kind of frustrating because, you know, obviously there's other metrics involved. But, you know, for any bands out there, definitely, and especially like in the metal scene where it's kind of like oversaturated, you know, there's a lot of bands out there and stuff, you know. I mean, I'd say definitely learning everything you can about the music industry and the music business, the way that it flows, like kind of reading up on your contracts, reading up on different contracts, reading up on different music managers and music management relationships. That's a huge thing, because a lot of artists and the industry in general are soured against and towards labels and management, like, you know, things like that. When they hear those terms, they're just like, oh shit, this is, you know, I'm gonna either sell out or I'm gonna, you know, be screwed over by somebody that's, you know, handling my art wrong, you know, my what I put out and shit. And so I mean, that's another thing that definitely inspired me with the label, was not wanting anybody else to deal with my art, you know, and being like, I want this to be from a 100%, you know, music, artistic, standpoint, without, at the same time while knowing my shit. And that was something that definitely helped me along in like parts that, I was unsure or uncertain of. I kind of was able to fall back on like little bits of like knowledge that I picked up here and there, and be like, okay, no, this is not like a good deal. Like, this is, something that I should do, and stay away from these labels, stay away from these kind of things. And I think that bands can definitely benefit off of just paying attention to that, paying attention to their own music scene, music community, paying attention to the promoters in their scene. And I mean, not like kissing ass or anything, but definitely like going up to them, talking to them, sharing with them their band or their project, or the fact that they even play music. Nobody can like read your mind, so it's a lot of the times just kind of sharing information and constantly gaining information as well, asking questions and stuff. And that's one thing I definitely wish I did a lot more of when I started the label, was ask other people, who had started labels or who had been involved with other bigger labels, just more questions about, how do I do this? How do I do that? And because a lot of the times, it's not as volatile or as like, competitive as as like kind of the mind, trains you to think. It's just very much so people are willing to share that information, especially, in the music community. And because we kind of, at the end of the day, we all want to see everybody, especially if we like each other's music, that's kind of just the root, the root of it there. It's like, if I like your music and you like my music, there's no reason why we shouldn't, help to boost each other up,
For sure. One of the other things that you mentioned earlier was the importance of just grinding it out as a band. And I just, I want to touch on that and say that there's a lot of validity to that. I know dudes in bands that are huge bands that do great tours, or they play huge festivals. And when they go home, they still have a day job.
Yeah.
And that's not the case for all of them, but the guys that I think are doing it the smart way are holding on to a day job, maybe finding something that's got some flexibility. Like, I'm not going to name names, but I know a guy who's a barber, and he's in a huge band, but when he's not on tour, he's back to barbering, and he's, saving that money and, doing what he can to put it away and help provide for his family. And so I think there's this huge misconception that there's massive bands playing large stages in the metal scene that are making a shit ton of money. That's not the case. A lot of them are lucky to still be able to pay their rent.
Yeah, it's very true.
I'm sure that a lot of people in the audience are curious as to why I invited you onto Punk Rock Talk, because we're not known for talking about metal here. So for those of you in the audience that are watching and are wondering about that, there is an important reason why I have Jay on here. And we're going to announce that here in just a little bit. But before we do that, if you have questions for Jay or myself, tap that question mark icon on your screen so that you can submit your questions there. Don't put them in the comments section. And we'll get to the live Q&A here in just a little bit. We'll talk about, some of those things, and then also why I invited him on here. Having said that, let's talk a little bit more about some of the bands on your label. I had the pleasure of listening to several different bands. You have your own playlist, which we need to talk about that as well.
Yes, for sure.
You have your own playlist on Spotify, which I just borrowed from because I was like, this is the best way to get these bands on our playlist. But having sat through several songs, it's apparent that you're not trying to represent just one niche in the metal world. Like you said, there's all these subgenres underneath the metal umbrella.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you're representing different bands that have a different vibe. There's some stuff that sounds more thrashy. There's some stuff that sounds more doom, even some stoner sounding shit.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about those bands on the label and kind of what's on the horizon for them.
Yeah, man. So we have 9 bands, technically 10 bands now on the label, and pretty much just the next big things is we have, let's see, bands kind of from all over the place. I mean, it's we're based in Atlanta, but I mean we have bands, a lot of bands in Florida. Let's see, in Miami we have No Coffin, and Swamp is from Jacksonville. Servants of the Mist, they are in Tampa, and then we have Parasite Cast, who's over in Bakersfield, California, and those guys are awesome. They're kind of like, a lot of these bands definitely have like a lot of crossover. Like No Coffin is a big crossover band, and Parasite Cast is definitely some crossover. Like they have like sludge and like some hardcore punk, kind of crusty stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And then let's see, back over here in Atlanta, we have Awaken the Ancient, Stonehenge, who just put out a single. Stonehenge, those guys are really cool. Jason is like a longtime friend of mine, and he actually grew up in the Tampa like metal and punk rock scene. But anyways, they have a EP dropping tomorrow. So for anybody that's like a fan of Black Sabbath and kind of like more stoner, like Pentagram and stuff like that, you should like that a lot. They have an EP dropping tomorrow. But let's see. Crypt also. Yeah, Crypt is a huge one. They're not from Atlanta, but they're from Augusta, and those guys are really have become really good friends of mine. Really awesome people. Mostly like they're thrash, but they definitely have some crossover elements. Bill was telling me that you really like them, so Crypt is definitely kind of appeases to the punk rock crowd. Bill likes them as well, and he's told me that like he doesn't like metal at all. So it's like if you can like Crypt, then that's a good thing. But they have some new music on the horizon. We've just been kind of finishing up the mixing and mastering stages for their latest. They recorded a full length at the beginning of this summer with Paul Golden at his studio, Crow Altar, which is up here in Atlanta, near Atlanta. And so that was a fun time. They came down here and just kind of spent a weekend and recorded the full length. So they have that coming out soon. And No Coffin has some music dropping in a month as well on September 9th. So they dropped an EP last month as well. So they got a bunch of new music going on. So and like I said, yeah, just pretty much gearing up for all of these releases with the bands and everything. So that's been a big, for like an independent record label, it's kind of me and Ryan Buck, my partner, and a few other people on the team. So for the most part, it's just kind of us like grinding down and getting everything done on top of our own music ventures as well. So that's something that is just always a 24/7 more or less, like 24/7 grind, owning your own business. So it's all good.
I'm curious, as a fellow metalhead, what are some of your favorite bands, and kind of what got you into the metal scene? I mean, there's always, like the gateway bands. Metallica is always like the go-to for everyone,
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to know what, kind of got you started in the metal scene.
Yeah, man. So a lot of, let's see, I'm trying to think of like the first metal band that I really listened to. I listen to, I mean, you know, it's like I always listen to a bunch of different shit. So like, I'm not gonna say Black Sabbath because that's obviously another one. But I did grow up listening to a lot of Black Sabbath and kind of, you know, hardcore punk and hardcore music in general. Like, but the more like modern hardcore, I guess, like the the like beat down, D beat hardcore stuff, and I guess now what is like deathcore and metalcore. It's kind of always constantly changing, but anyways, those specific scenes definitely kind of got me, mostly because there wasn't a hardcore punk scene growing up when I was growing up in Atlanta that, you know, I could like really attach to. Like Masquerade was kind of one of the only, you know, all ages venues that were throwing punk shows and stuff. So I kind of would go to a bunch of the hardcore shows that were going on around some of the other, like just wherever I could find them in Atlanta, which is strange. Like we always had hardcore and metal shows going on instead of like just straight up like hardcore punk shows, and really until like Rotten Stitches and some of the other bands kind of came in and started doing a bunch of shit here with the punk rock crowd. So, anyways, but so some of the metal bands that I really fell in love with at first, I mean, Mastodon was always just growing up in Atlanta. I mean, especially when some of their older stuff, you know, was heavier and more like kind of like sludgy, like faster, I guess, you know. So that was a big influence for me. Black Tusk was another one. This band right here, these guys, you know, from they fucking kill it, man. And you know, that's another band that really, like, all of those crossover bands that I really, you know, that those were big influencers for metal for me. Like that was kind of, I mean, like the DRI and like Suicidal Tendencies and stuff like that, like the bands that were like always kind of dropping like heavier elements into their music, but also still kind of retaining that punk energy and stuff like that. Venom is another band that I really really love. Like Venom's awesome. You know, just they kind of still have that, they're whatever, like black metal, but you know, not like they definitely have that like rock and roll kind of, you know, vibe and stuff. And it was definitely a lot of those bands where I just kind of slowly, I mean, a lot of it was my playing style too, just on it, like as a musician, you know, kind of like just like playing punk rock and doing that stuff, and then just like wanting, I don't know, like wanting to like develop my taste and like not taste, but like guitar skills basically. It's just like, man, like I want to do all this crazy shit, and kind of like gotta listen to this different music and stuff. But I definitely say like one of my favorite, most impactful bands that isn't necessarily metal, or they probably wouldn't consider themselves metal, but definitely one of the heavier bands that got me into heavy music and at a younger age was actually a band called Defeater. it's they're really awesome, and again, it's not really anybody that, you know, would be considered metal, or like, you know, like big bands like Slayer or anything. Like obviously I love those bands and everything like that, you know, but it was very much so certain, like other bands were more impactful to me, you know, and getting me kind of involved on the, you know, it's like this is not just some like heavy music that I want to like break down to or whatever the fuck, like, you know, it's like I wanted to kind of get involved and like figure out, you know, how to make more music happen like that, and you know, it's, so yeah, man. Atlas Moth is one of the other bands that I really really loved from the get go. Like one of the first metal bands really that I found out about, just like pure metal band, like on its own, in its own little genre. I think I found out about it. Like they're a very little known band, but they're really awesome. They're like called The Atlas Moth, and they're from Chicago, but one of my favorite all-time bands, like to this day. I think I found out about them when I was like 15 or some shit, but
Very cool, man. It's funny because my introduction to a lot of more underground metal bands was actually from the punk scene. Um,
yeah.
you know, like I grown up hearing bands like Metallica and Pantera and Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and, you know, that whole thing. And then of course, like the 80s glam thing, like that was kind of inescapable when I was
Right.
growing up. And like I always liked those bands. But again, that's like all like kind of surface level stuff. But the first band that someone introduced me to that made me just stop and go like, whoa, this is incredible, is somebody played At the Gates Slaughter of the Soul for me.
Oh yeah, that is.
And like everything about that record, like especially because at the time, like I was so into UK 82 stuff, and you know, just the fast aggressive shit.
Right.
And when I heard Slaughter of the Soul, the the melody of the guitars, it just reminded me of being on like the Grim Reaper's pirate ship or some shit, you know? Like
Yeah, man.
I just
I
thought it was
totally-
so badass. And by the time I had heard it, like they had already disbanded. But the singer Tomas had joined another band called Night Rage. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I think. Yeah, go ahead. I think so.
Yeah, he was on their first two albums. And they're still together. They actually just put out a new record a few months back, which is fucking amazing. It's called Abyss Rising. But the guitarist is the leader of that band. And like when you talk about just incredible guitar playing that's so melodic and like, it's that classic Swedish melodic death metal sound.
For sure.
But as time has gone on, like that band has even started to incorporate some elements of like the whole core sound.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy because like a lot of those guys that come from like the 90s metal scene, when metalcore started like popping up, they were like, what the fuck is this shit? Like it's not cool.
For sure.
But that has actually become so huge now that it's inescapable, and a lot of those bands have implemented that sound into their own, which is really wild.
Yeah.
Again, if you're in the audience and you have questions for myself or for Jay, tap that question mark icon on your screen. I'd like to go ahead and open it up for the live Q&A. So as soon as I see some questions populating in the queue there, then I'll get to that. But having said that, let's talk about the real reason why I invited you on to Punk Rock Talk today. You've got a new signing taking place. Let's talk about that. Who is coming to Terminus Hate City?
Yeah, man. So I am really, really stoked to even say this. Like we've been sitting on this for like freaking like weeks, if not more now. But very stoked to announce that the Horribles are joining the Terminus Hate City family officially. And so that's something that, I've known those guys for the longest time. That might have been probably like one of the first stops on the first tours that I ever went on was seeing, Drake's fucking face from the Horribles and shit. So, I mean, that's very, very excited to have them, on the label family, and it's kind of going forward into our next like stages as a label, for sure, because we have other bands that are not just metal and everything like that for 2023 that we've been in talks with, and so that's something that's really exciting for us to kind of push past, like as definitely like core, we're always going to support, that's our core foundation, is just metal, punk, and rock and roll, man. And I mean, that's just kind of like underground music, I think, in general is really, we don't necessarily have a specific label, but it's exciting to to have a band like the Horribles on board, you know, who have so many different, you know, just they're awesome, man. Like they've always captured my attention and soul for sure. You know, live music and beyond. You know, live music and recorded. So very excited to be working with those dudes.
Hell yeah, man! Those guys are awesome. I was
Yeah. Oh,
fortunate.
and I'm sorry. They have new music on the way as well. We're not gonna drop that yet, but they definitely have some stuff. They have a full length that they are getting ready to drop and everything like that. So. Yeah, man.
That's fucking cool. I can't wait to hear that, man. I was fortunate enough to have those guys on here a few weeks back. Great interview. Those guys are grinding hard in Florida. You know, they have their venue that they're bringing bands through on tour, and you know, like you could tell that their heart is really in it.
It is, man. It really is. They've had multiple bands, or at least they've definitely had No Coffin at their venue in Tampa, Pasco area. I can't remember exactly where it is, but sorry, Drake. I know it's somewhere on in that area, but it's really awesome to see them kind of going back to like that whole grind. Like, you know, just the more that you see, like kind of everybody, you know, not just like being in a band and, you know, doing that, like getting on stage, doing the whole thing, you know, it's like, you know, wanting to see more of this, like how are we going to create this longevity, you know, of like, you know, being able to do this for the, you know, rest of our lives, you know. And so it's awesome to see other people like building up their communities in that sense. And I mean, that definitely goes to say that's a huge thing that I look at when talking to bands on signing with the label, you know, is like what they do in their community, not just like, obviously, you know, it's like sound fucking good, but like do do more than that, you know, like what are you doing, you know, for your community and for yourself, you know, and not just kind of, you know, hey, here's a song, isn't it badass? It's like, yeah, that sounds cool, but like, what else are you doing, man? Like, you know, so I love
so true. No, it's so true, man. I totally relate to that. You know, when we decided that we were going to relaunch the Havoc, we talked a lot about like, you know, what are we going to do that is going to be worthwhile for one, and that is going to interest people enough to talk about us, you know, because a lot of bands, you know, that they come out of retirement, they have their reunion, they put out some songs, and that's cool. But like, there's got to be more to it than that if you're wanting to have some kind of significance or longevity. And that's really how the birth of this whole thing started with Punk Rock Talk.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'll tell this to anybody that's in a band and wants to grow it. Like, do whatever you can to get other people talking about you and
For
become unavoidable.
Exactly. That's some great advice. Seriously. Like,
well, I don't know, man. Like, I just felt like if I was gonna put forth the effort and the energy and the time into relaunching this band, I didn't want it to just be like something that was passive or forgettable. You know, how can we serve the community and talk about shit that is interesting from when we were originally a band till now and what's happening now.
yeah.
And it all goes back to, like you said, man, serving the community. That's what helps it grow. That's what helps the music grow.
Yeah. 100%.
Having said that, let's go ahead and start with the live Q&A. If you are in the audience and you have a question for myself or for Jay, Tap that question mark icon on your screen to submit them. Now is the time. Here we go. First question comes from our good friend Kurt from Dismantled Records. He says, is your label digital only or have physical releases too? CD, cassettes, or vinyl?
Yes, we're not just digital, mostly cassettes and vinyl. Well, we actually just did our first vinyl pressing for Swamp that dropped maybe like a month or two ago. We put that on the shelves probably closer to 2 months ago. But so that was the first vinyl pressing that we've had up until this point. We've only done CDs and cassettes. Recently, I decided, like unless there was like high demand for them, that we're only going to do cassettes and vinyl. Only like because for some reason cassettes are coming back and CDs are not. But and vinyl is awesome. I love vinyl. So the more vinyl that we can press for bands, the better. I love vinyl. So that's definitely so yes, yeah, not just digital only.
I think that's so awesome that you're focusing on digital media. I'm sorry, physical media.
Yes, yeah.
We talked a lot about this subject on the show. And, we've kind of gotten to this place in society and in the music world where everything digital is just so easy to forget.
For sure.
It's so passive. It
is.
Whereas physical media is very, very, very difficult to ignore. And I am a firm believer that once you give physical media to someone, you literally bring life to it, because you have now contributed to that person's experience and their existence.
Absolutely.
Part of their existence is experiential. And that something that is tangible, that they can hold and that they can look at, or they can, open it up and all of that, it creates memories that are hard to just wipe away. Whereas scrolling on a screen, is kind of like whatever.
Yeah. It's like it's kind of a generational or multi-generational imprint. Like it's hard to. I mean that movie, The Book of Eli or whatever, where it's for a different reason. Like he has the iPod or whatever that he's listening to, throughout. But it's like an apocalyptic scenario and everything. And I just think of that all the time. It's like, well, what's gonna happen if if all you have is your music up. Obviously, this isn't going to happen like tomorrow, but like just in general, it's you have all of your music on this cloud, this digital in this digital file, and it sort of loses it loses a lot of its meaning, its impact, to the next the next people down the line, the next generation, and everything like that. And I've seen that's one thing. I've seen the newest generation in the music scene more interested in physical than digital, and that was just a huge push too. It was like, well, shit, like if the next if these young kids are out here wanting to buy cassettes, like that's something to be said. That means that there's an appreciation that's definitely getting passed down somewhere along the line. That's it's working somewhere along the way. So like and I definitely think that no one can really deny the fact that it's literally in papers, on stats everywhere, that vinyl has made its comeback, and is as you were saying, passive income is the digital age. Like we can, as musicians, we can make a little bit of money while we sleep, in that sense. But where we're really gonna make an impact is investing in ourselves and having physical forms to pass along to countless amount of people, and I mean, just that one person that can hold that anything in their hand, that in my opinion is way more impactful than, somebody that's, holding their phone in their hand and showing, their friend a song that they just heard about. It's like, no, dude, take this physical thing, check it out, borrow a record, a cassette, a CD, whatever, and you make impacts that way, and people remember you. I mean, people remember you just from handing them a shirt, and they're just like, holy shit, thank you.
Well, I think that if you look at the history of music, all of the artists or bands that are now viewed as legendary or iconic spent years, if not decades, releasing physical media. And that physical media goes all over the world and goes into people's homes. And then those people age and start families of their own, and very well may still have that physical media in their collection. And then the next thing you know, their children are entering that age of music discovery and are finding that physical media and asking questions. Yep. Who is this? What is this? And I don't think that's really happening in terms of digital content. So the importance of that physical content, I don't think can be overstated. So I'm a huge advocate for that. So I applaud you for making that a priority for your label and the bands on it, because I think that it's going to serve you and them well.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I mean, that's really awesome to hear as well, just coming from, like, you obviously are really experienced in the music industry, man. And like, I definitely look up to you guys. So like that is like just huge coming, from that standpoint, like, cause I fully agree with everything, like with all of that. Like, it's kind of, it's amazing in a way to see that happen. And I mean, that was something that was one of the first things that I kind of got turned on to music, was just holding, vinyl in my hand and kind of being like, what is this? Like, how does this work?
Right.
And
I was hoping that we'd have some more questions from the audience, but I haven't seen any more come through. So I apologize for that. But I do want you to know that I have really enjoyed this conversation so far, and I value your input and having you as a guest on the show.
Absolutely.
There's a few more things to talk about before we have to wrap it up.
Yep.
One of those things is we have an announcement to make for 40 Fest, and we've kind of had a little bit of a break in announcing bands for that, but we're going to go ahead and resume that today. Would you like to announce to the audience who we have confirmed for 40 Fest January 2023? Who's the new announcement?
I would love to. So the next, we have, I guess, a couple of them, and apparently one was so good that we got to announce twice, and that's Billy Bats and the Made Men.
What's up, Billy Bats?
Fucking amazing. So those guys will definitely be on the 2023 bill. We also have Cheap Sex and Cheap Sex and Dead 77. So those guys are gonna be on the fucking 2023 bill, and I'm fucking really stoked about that. So I'm gonna be partying up in 8 cities. So
hell yeah, man. Both of those bands, Dead 77 and Cheap Sex, they have a dear place in my heart. I've got a lot of memories with the guys in Cheap Sex over the years, the early days, playing shows with them and touring with them. Mike Virus. I have so much love for that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to finally see him in person again. And to hear Cheap Sex again. And then Dead 77, homies from LA. They've got a new record out on Dismantled Records called Demons.
Yes.
Fucking rad. We've been trying to set some shit up with them for months now. So we know at the very least we'll be playing with them at 40 Fest. So I'm super fucking excited for that.
For sure. Hell yeah.
Before I let you go, do you have any shout outs that you'd like to give?
Yeah, so let's see. I'd love to shout out definitely, Bill from 40 Fest, setting us up with this, setting you and I up. Would love to shout out, the Horribles. Like, obviously, those guys are fucking awesome. And yeah, I guess next week's guest, if are we doing that yet, or like just
let's hold off on that because actually I saw a couple more audience questions
okay,
come
cool.
through. So
Yeah.
let's do that, and then we'll make that announcement.
All right, cool, for sure.
All right. So let me go back here to the live Q&A. This next question comes from our good friend Bill Johnson at 40 Ounce Booking Atlanta. What's up with a venue in Atlanta?
Oh yeah, okay. So we are working on actively finding a venue in Atlanta. So that's something that, there's been a lot of losses in venues and friendly punk rock dive bar metal establishments in our cities. So that's kind of one thing that we're working on actively. I don't know like how long it's going to take, but Bill does bring up a good point that we've lost a lot of venues over the years, and we're losing kind of more on the horizon, and that's just something that as a business owner, that's something that we're looking at like actively every day and kind of just searching for properties and trying to figure that out. So I'm glad he brought that up because it's important. And I mean, I'd say it's important for every for anybody's music scene. If your music scene doesn't have a venue, find one and get one, because that's gonna help it out a lot. I mean, without a doubt.
I think that's one of the harsh realities of the world we're living in right now, post-pandemic. COVID really hit venues super hard, and so many of them have closed. And while I think that's really unfortunate, and my heart goes out to the families that run those businesses that lost their income. But the optimist in me says, hey, although we've lost something, it creates room for something new. And maybe whatever is new will be better.
I completely agree with that. It's like we either adapt or leave all of this behind, and that's not really an option. I'm not gonna quit or give up. So it's like you got to move on and figure out a way to work with whatever you got.
Absolutely. Okay, we got a couple more questions coming through, so that's rad. This next question actually comes from my beautiful wife, Tandeli Lace. She says, how do you find bands to sign, or do they find you?
Little bit of both. So we've had some, probably about like 50-50. Some bands have found us and been like, hey, do you guys want to work with us? And it's definitely been a procedure, just not like a crazy process, but just kind of listening and figuring out what their goals are. And then other bands I listen to, I love, I see them in the community or are introduced or whatever, something like that, and reach out to them and kind of figure out, is there anything that I can do, for them? I mean, it's definitely, the music industry's completely changed now. So like as a, record label, I don't really look as much so as like, I'm going to sign these bands and just, they're going to get paid out and like all this crazy stuff. It's more of like a kind of partnership. Like, what can I do for them? What can they do for me? And, kind of how can we grow from there? So yeah, I usually, a little bit of 50-50. So, I definitely am open to bands, getting in my email and the Terminus Hate City, DMs, and just kind of like, seeing what's up and sharing their music. You never are able to kind of know unless you expose yourself to other people. So, we definitely welcome that. And that's kind of just a big process is uh, putting our name out there so that people can know that there's a label out there potentially for them. Um,
Okay, so to follow up with that, the next question comes from Marco RPSE. He says, my band, Terroristic Threat, is in the studio and almost done recording. Best way to shop it with you?
Email for sure, definitely. It's pretty much just the Terminus Hate City email, which is bjessup, JESSUP, at terminushatecity.com. And that's, once again, that's bjessup at terminushatecity.com. And that's my email and the label email. So, yeah, like we'll just either kind of, again, it's a process. So it's not something that would be like an immediate, answer, but it's not like we get back to you as soon as possible, but it is something that we gotta kind of go through, just figuring out, what is the best, strategy for your band, if it fits with other bands, on the label and everything like that. So, but yeah, just shoot us an email and we'll definitely get back to you for sure. Love to hear
Awesome.
from you.
All right, man. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on Punk Rock Talk today. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and believe me, I could easily talk with you for another hour at least.
For sure.
But time waits for no one, so I do have to bring this episode to a close. But before we do that, let's go ahead and make the announcement who next week's guest is going to be.
Awesome. All right, cool. So almost started this earlier, but next week's guest on Punk Rock Talk will be Milton Chavez from Muddy Roots Festival, and yeah, that'll be going down beginning of September, first week of or the September 1st through 4th. So
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with him. You know, this show is kind of like finally, branching out a little bit.
yeah,
And like I said, as much as I love talking about punk rock, and there's punk rock bands to talk about with him for sure, but there's other shit happening too. So it's nice to kind of expand a little bit. And again, like I've really enjoyed chatting metal with you, and I would like to continue that conversation later. Not on a live stream.
same here, man.
Yeah.
I'll be seeing you in January of 2023, right? We'll be hanging out.
Oh yeah, man! I can't wait for that shit. It's gonna be epic.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, bro. Well, thanks again, and I'm gonna go ahead and play us out. This is.
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah,
you
you're
for having me.
welcome. You're welcome. Again, this song is Nosophobic by Crypt. Thanks everybody for watching Punk Rock Talk.
Cheers, y'all.